I warn you, some of the clips you're going to see tonight are graphic and disturbing. I want to start with a clip that we showed you a couple of nights ago. Journalist, columnist, and author Virginia Ironside. She was on the BBC this last Sunday, and she made this stunning declaration on the BBC.
If I were a mother of a suffering child, I would be the first to want, a deeply suffering child, I would be the first to want to put a pillow over its face.
Dr. Peter Evans,
as I would with any suffering thing. And I think the difference is that my feeling of horror, suffering, is much greater than my feeling of getting rid of a couple of cells, because suffering can go on for years.
I'm sorry, I was just about to introduce another guest there, but that's a pretty horrifying thing to say, that you would put a pillow over there.
Of course I would, if it was a child I really loved who is in agony. I think any good mother would.
This is horrifying on so many levels. The way she casually describes suffocating an infant is something any loving mother would do. She's not a monster. She's not evil. She is doing what any loving mother would do. Of course she would. Of course she would smother her child. Also, the way she refers to a baby as a couple of cells. Perhaps most shocking of all is the fact that she doesn't even realize that what she's saying is that controversial. So here's a mother saying that, of course, all good loving mothers would smother their children. If they were in pain, it's out of compassion. Now, let me switch gears slightly. This is another clip from England. We'll get to America in a second. But this one is from the environmentalist who believe that if we don't act within 4 years, there is no reversing climate change. So they want to warn you. Well, they've already tried to warn you about this, but now they need to kick it up a notch, because a nudge isn't enough. Now maybe a slap across the face. What you're about to see is very graphic.
We're thinking of using our car less. I'm going to cycle to school. That's fantastic, Jemima.
Take it full, please.
No pressure at all, but it'd be great to get a sense of how many of you might do this. Just a rough percentage. That's fantastic. And those not? Philip and Tracy. That's fine, that's absolutely fine. Your own choice. Okay, class, thank you so much for today, and I will see you all tomorrow. Oh! Just before you go, I just need to press this little button here. Now everybody, please remember to read chapters 5 and 6 on volcanoes and glaciation.
Okay, so remember, they believe in Saul Alinsky, the ends justify the means. They thought this was okay. Nobody said this would be a bad idea until it hit the air. And then when people freaked out, then they said first it was a joke. It's not a joke. They have now come out and said, look, there's only 4 years left to act. We had to wake people up. Okay, well, what if there's only 1 year left to act, or a month, or 10 days, or we're a year behind? What do we do? If you literally believe the world is doomed unless we act, and you've devalued humankind, what is drastic to you? I mean, we've already seen the environmentalists. They've already destroyed careers. They want to ban people from getting a meteorology license unless you agree with them. Anybody in business who speaks up against them, they are deniers, they're destroyed, they're discredited. You're a Holocaust denier. Well, when those nudges don't work, what is next? Hey, I know. How about if they send skeptics to court? Could you do that? How about imprison people who deny global warming? Would you execute them? I know you wouldn't do it with a little button. You couldn't, but this sounds implausible, doesn't it? Sounds ridiculous? Let me show you something from theblaze.com. Here's a story that is on there today. They have begun gathering a list of all those ridiculous, implausible ideas that have been said by environmentalists recently. Remember, the ends justify the means. They're saving the planet. In June of last year, liberal blog site TPM posted an article and then quickly had to take it down when people started to protest that read, quote, At what point do we jail or execute global warming deniers? In 2006, the eco-magazine Grist called for Nuremberg-style trials for skeptics. In 2008, The Guardian reported that NASA's James Hansen called for the trials of climate skeptics for high crimes against humanity. That's a NASA official. In 2008, Canadian environmentalist David Suzuki called for government leaders skeptical of global warming to be thrown into jail. In 2007, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said of skeptics, this is treason. We need to start treating them as traitors. Well, there's more, including the environmentalist that said, soon another generation will come and strangle you in your beds. Find it at theblaze.com. We have trials, we have prison, we have treason, we have execution. Oh, and then we have that joke on TV that basically shows that. Oh, and then another person talking about smothering their own baby or a couple of cells with a pillow because it is the loving and right thing to do. These are not lone, isolated incidents of raving lunatics. I'll show you in a few minutes an ad that is running here in New York that will boggle your mind. It would be horrible if these twisted ideas came from the mind of raving lunatics, but they're not. They're very rational people who just believe in things that are different than you. Where did these ideas come from? Well, you can find them all from the same place. Progressivism here in America, Marxism overseas, and Fabian Socialism in Australia, New Zealand, England, and Europe. They're all the same thing. They're all the same stock of people. I've talked to you a lot about progressives and Marxists, but Fabian Socialists, look them up. You will be astounded what you find. It's all the same pool of people. The Fabian Socialist was a society that was founded in January of 1884. The members sought to influence public opinion on socialism. But what made them unique was, at the time, if you wanted to be a socialist, you needed a mass revolution. Well, they preferred the selective education. Selective education, you see it here beginning under the Woodrow Wilson administration. It was the education of the powerful few, especially those in government and the media, who could lead reforms in government. It is why our media is so screwed up, and they all think alike. Their strategy is called the doctrine of inevitability of gradualism. What does that mean? The doctrine of inevitability of gradualism. Let's say you say to your wife, hey, honey, I want to rebuild an engine in the living room. She's not going to do that. She's going to say, what is wrong with you? But if you believe that that is what needs to be done, you want to be able to watch the football game while rebuilding your engine of your car, and you want to do it in your comfy lazy boy, what do? Well, you can do one thing. You can drag the engine into the center of the living room, and then she goes nuts. Or you can just bring a spark plug in and just leave it on the table until she stops noticing it. Then bring another one in, and then another one, and then another part, and then another part, and the carburetor. Pretty soon, you got the whole damn engine sitting in there. She'll tell you at first, can you stop? Can you stop with them? Can you take these away? You just leave them there. She'll forget eventually, and she won't notice that you have all of the parts of the engine that you're going to build there in the living room. It becomes inevitable because you can say, it's already here. The doctrine of inevitability of gradualism. Okay, now why the name Fabian? The Fabian Society. Well, this is after General Quintus Fabius Maximus. He had a brilliant strategy. He advanced in his battles not through front-on battles, but instead through harassment and attrition. In other words, he wore everybody out, almost like overwhelm your opponents, overwhelm the system. He would just constantly wear them out and just hit them, little ones, hit them, until finally they were just worn out from the harassment. And then it became inevitable. Gosh, is it becoming inevitable that we just can't get out of this debt bubble? Little step at a time? All right, Fabian Socialist, one of the early members, was George Bernard Shaw. This is a man who is highly regarded still to this day. This is a guy who won a Nobel Peace Prize, who won an Oscar. The BBC described him this way: a iconoclastic playwright, journalist, a scintillating public speaker, arts reviewer, and campaigning socialist. Well, here's what everybody ignores from Shaw. This. Watch.
Just put him there and say, sir or madam, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence? If you can't justify your existence, if you're not pulling your weight in the social boat, if you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little more, then clearly we cannot use the big organization of our society for the purpose of keeping you alive, because your life does not benefit us and it can't be very much use to yourself.
It's not useful to you or to the society. It's horrifying stuff, yet I guarantee you your son or daughter has never heard a bad thing about this man. He's critically acclaimed by the establishment. It may be tough for them to swallow, but he is a monster. No one talks about the genius of Hitler's good ideas like the Volkswagen. The good ideas don't balance out the bad ones. The man was a monster. Shaw was a famous playwright, but he was also a strong believer in eugenics. It was George Bernard Shaw. Ask yourself if you ever learn this. Ask your kids if they learn this. Who dreamt up the gas chambers, the death chambers? Who did? George Bernard Shaw dreamt them up to get rid of the undesirables. Quote, a part of eugenic politics would finally land us in an extensive use of the lethal chamber. A great many people will have to be put out of existence simply because it wastes other people's time to look after them. I don't care that he wrote witty little plays. The man was a monster. All of this stems from the same place. Fabian Socialists, Marxists. And what was it that Hillary Clinton called herself during the campaign when she was embarrassed to answer if she was a liberal? She said this.
I prefer the word progressive, which has a real American meaning, going back to the progressive era at the beginning of the 20th century.
At the beginning of the 20th century. At the end of the 19th century, and it came roaring into America at the beginning of the 20th century. They believe in what's good for the collective. They're also secular humanists. God at best is something to hang on to just in case. They are the people that you must have evolution. You must have evolution. If you can take God out of the picture and have evolution, then this is all okay to do it. When you think the way these guys do, you tend to dehumanize individual situations. Suddenly, you're convinced that it's okay to kill one person or two in order to save thousands or end suffering for either thousands or for one. It's how Shaw, Sanger, and now the global warming nuts all end up into the same place where they're saying, well, so we have to eliminate a few people or throw them in prison because they disagree. Those in pain, those who are inferior, and I guess now those who are skeptics.